Freeman.
Here.
Commissioner McNulty.
Here.
Commissioner Sturts. We have a quorum. Unfortunately, Mr. Sturts couldn't be with us today, but he will be receiving this information at a later time separately. So our first item on the agenda is call to order. We've done that. Second item, report legal advice and direction to counsel regarding Attorney General inquiry. The Commission may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public for the purpose of obtaining legal advice. Our legal counsel today, we have Joe Canefield and Mary O'Grady. And would one of you like to give us an update on the Attorney General investigation?
Sure, Madam Chair. What I'd like to do is give a brief update and then recommend that we move into executive session, not just for item 2, but because the items are so interrelated, perhaps go into executive session for the other items on which we're permitted to give legal advice.
Okay.
And let me see. So as everyone knows, the Attorney General announced an inquiry into procurement and open meeting law matters relating to the mapping consultant procurement a little more than 3 weeks ago. That was Thursday, July 21st, which, as you all remember, also was the first day of our public hearings that just ended a week ago Saturday. We have since then been in communication with the Assistant Attorney General that was assigned to the matter in an effort to work cooperatively to get matters resolved. We have provided them with a copy of an executive session transcript that they requested, and so we've been trying to work through those issues. They've also requested interviews of all 5 commissioners, and we wanted the opportunity to fully brief the commissioners on that request, as well as the AG inquiry as a whole. They also we had requested, because the initial press release announcing the inquiry referred to reports of concern, so we did ask for copies of any reports that prompted the inquiry. There wasn't a specific written open meeting law complaint, as is often the case. So we asked for copies of the reports. We did receive those. And then also after receiving those, we received last week investigative demands that would ask for, again, interviews of all commissioners and for documents from all commissioners. And we received those last Thursday. I think that's the current status of what's going on with the investigation, and beyond that, my recommendation would be that we go into executive session for legal advice and direction to counsel.
Okay, did anyone have any questions this time or comments?
No.
I do have one question.
Excuse me, did you turn that up or I can hear you?
My battery's dead, but use my
There.
Thank you. The report, Mrs. O'Grady, I have a question about the reports that you received. Are those public?
We received them through a public records request, so those would be public record.
Okay, and they consisted of yellow sheet reports and emails?
Yes, they had yellow sheet reports and some emails from citizens, and it was largely comments that were similar to what's been in the some of the public comment, primarily concerned about conflicts of interest, allegations related to the chair, which have been discussed previously in open session. There wasn't a specific, the only references to the open meeting law, and I found 3. There was a reference in a yellow sheet to placing how we would be providing open meeting law training on a future agenda. There was a reference to how the Commission had spent a lot of time in executive session during the procurement process, and then there was a general reference to allegations of open meeting law violations, but nothing specific, just a general statement. But the rest was mostly alleging conflicts of interest and then expressing concern about the strategic work for Democrats in the past.
And these were emails that may expressed concerns that are similar to the sorts of things we've heard in our public meetings.
That's right, Madam.
Thank you.
Any other comments from commissioners?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
just for clarity's sake, the purpose of the e-session will be for the commission to get specific legal advice, that is, facts applied to the law on the subjects on agenda items 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it's a question and answer session, commissioners to lawyers, and that no action will be taken in the e-session, correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Freeman, we also have on, no action will be taken, but I have one clarification to that. In addition to legal advice, which is noticed for item 2 and item 3, there is the opportunity to give direction to council in e-session under the executive session that's noticed for paragraph 4. And so they can provide that direction to council in executive session. So that does permit discussion under that provision. So it's not just legal advice. There is discussion and direction to council.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Do I hear a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of obtaining legal advice and to cover agenda items 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we'll also be discussing and possibly giving some direction to council?
I make that motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, we will go into executive session. The time is now 8:50, and unfortunately, I think we have to do that in this room. There is no private room that we can go into, so I'm afraid we'll have to ask the public to step out during this time. Apologize for the inconvenience. Okay, this meeting of the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission will now enter back into public session. The time is 11:04 a.m. Thank you to members of the public for being patient with us while we were in executive session to discuss these agenda items 2 through 5 on our agenda today. Do I hear a motion to, with regard to agenda item 5, discussion, legal advice, and possible action, approving expenditures for council? Is there an
I think
motion?
I will make that motion if that's okay. In the spirit of cooperation with the AG's office, I'd like to move that that council proceed as directed in the executive session. Is that the?
This is with regard to approving expenditures for council to provide legal services in connection with the investigation.
I'm sorry, Linda, I think it's the, were you going to make that motion?
I'll make a motion that, although it may not be necessary and you may not be able to hear me.
Although it may not be necessary and may not be applicable, in an abundance of caution, I would move that we authorize payment of attorney's fees for representation of the Commission pursuant to ARS 38-431.07B.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Any discussion?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
I can't support the motion as it was made because it just seems to be sort of carte blanche authority that the Commission is potentially granting to approving expenditures for council under the statute. If the motion was limited, and I understand the caveats and reservations made in the motion, but if it's limited to the circumstances that the Commission is facing now, which is a preliminary investigation by the AG, and strictly to that with no enforcement action having been filed, I could support it, but as the motion has made, I cannot support it.
I would amend the motion to say that it's made in connection with the investigation by the Attorney General, the current investigation by the Attorney General.
Okay,
Chair?
is there a second for the amended motion?
I'll second that. Before what I'd like to make is a comment. When we hired our attorneys, we hired them to represent us as commissioners, not as individuals. So any legal proceeding regarding the commission work, they'll be representing us. So I think this motion is redundant and unnecessary. So changing the motion, really, I guess I'm not understanding, but I'll go ahead and second the motion, even though, again, I think it's unnecessary.
Any other discussion?
Only that the statute applies to legal action. And so I think my understanding is that the very prestigious group of lawyers that are sitting in front of me right now are authorized to represent the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission, but out of an abundance of caution, and even though the statute may not apply to us, there is a statute that deals with payment of attorney's fees in connection with a legal action commenced under the open meeting law, which has not occurred. But if it were to occur, my motion would be to authorize these attorneys to represent us in connection with that legal action pursuant to ARS 38431.07B.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
and my position will be that if there is a legal action instituted by the AG's office, then the commission needs to revisit this issue. Right now, we're pretty much making the decision going forward as to any legal action that the commission may face, and I just don't think it's appropriate to make the motion to craft it that broadly at this time.
Just understand, the language of the statute only applies to legal actions that are commenced under the open meeting law. And as Commissioner Herrera indicated, our contract covered open meeting law issues for the commission. And I just want to make sure I understand the limitation. And that's why it probably doesn't apply at all to the AG inquiry, because there's not a legal action that's been commenced. There's this preliminary inquiry. So I'm not sure I fully understand the difference between the motion that the Commissioner McNulty has made and Commissioner Freeman's limitation. I just want to make sure I understand.
Well, I'll do the best I can explaining it, but perhaps for purposes of this preliminary inquiry, which concerns alleged violations of open meeting law and procurement violations, if this motion were limited to authorizing counsel, whether it's required, authorization is required or not, I could support it. But if there's a subsequent action filed against the commission, I don't know what that action, legal action, might entail, what issues there might be entailed in that investigation or legal action. The scope of it, I mean, it makes a big difference, and it could entail substantial expenditure by this commission. And I'm just thinking hypothetically, who knows what could come down the pike, and I have no foreknowledge of that. But I think it would be appropriate at that time for the commission to discuss that, perhaps get budgets, understand the scope of any subsequent. And it's just, my concern is right now we're just going forward prospectively, carte blanche. The lawyers are going to be authorized to represent the council on any subsequent legal action. Does that?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Frieden, but you are comfortable with us doing the representation that's necessary, the AG inquiry, and if there is any legal action related to the AG inquiry that we're describing now that's referenced in Agenda Item 2. So the motion is as to legal fees in relation to the inquiry and any litigation that may be commenced in regard to Agenda Item 2.
I guess there's an issue as to what the nature and scope of the inquiry is, and I don't know if I fully understand that, and I suppose that could change, which is why if legal action was subsequently commenced, I think it would be more appropriate for the commission to address this issue at that time.
I appreciate Mr. Freeman's comments. However, that's not my motion. Just if we need to read the motion back in order to be clear about what it was, we can do that. But I just want to be clear. I believe that the motion was clear that it would be legal fees in connection with any legal action commenced pertaining to the Attorney General's Office investigation.
I agree with that. And one quick comment, if Commissioner Freeman has his own motion, can he make his own motion if you don't agree with Commissioner McNulty's motion? Because I'm assuming what she said is what you want. So, but if not, I would like for you to make your own motion.
This is the discussion on the motion that's before the commission right now.
And Madam Chair, you can vote on the motion. There's been discussion, and you can vote on the motion on the table.
Okay. Should we have the motion read back, though, by the court reporter? Is that possible?
At this point, I think I may have restated it 3 times,
Yeah.
so she may have a little trouble finding it. I would call the question, Madam Chair. I would call the question that we vote
Okay.
on the motion.
Well, we have a seconded amended motion, I believe, is what that was.
To the amended motion.
My amended motion was, I'll restate it one more time, because I understand what it is that I believe I'm trying to accomplish. Although it may not be necessary and it may not be applicable to this body, in an abundance of caution, I move that we authorize payment of attorney's fees for representation of the commission by our attorneys in connection with any legal action filed in connection with the current Attorney General investigation pursuant to ARS 38431.07B.
And I seconded that.
Seconded. Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so we have, and I'm voting aye, so we have 3 ayes. It's Herrera, Mathis, McNulty. Freeman is voting no.
Madam Chair,
Mr.
I was just, out of curiosity, for Commissioner Freeman, what motion could have McNulty made that would have, that you would have supported? Because I'm confused. Because I think she amended it to reflect your concerns, which I disagreed with, but I respect that. So I'm baffled.
But
I was just going to say, Madam Chair, I prefer it when
Freeman?
you run the hearings.
Okay, sorry. Did you have a comment, Ms. O'Grady?
Oh, Madam Chair, certainly Commissioner Freeman can respond if he'd like to, but also the vote's been taken, and we can move on to the next
Okay.
issue.
Okay. So is there a motion, do I hear a motion to authorize council to proceed as we had discussed during executive session?
I make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
I just want to make it clear that, I mean, the commission had pretty extensive and wide-ranging discussion with council. I can't, of course, discuss that, and there was certain recommendations made. I can support the commission going forward on this motion with the understanding that we're endorsing the recommendations that constitute the entire body of that discussion, and that the commission is working to have a follow-up hearing, perhaps on Wednesday, perhaps Thursday. It's going to depend on logistics, to have a follow-up on this issue, the commission vis-a-vis the AG's investigation. So that having been said, I could support the motion.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries unanimously. To follow up on Mr. Freeman's point that, yes, we will be, this will be an agenda item that we're going to either be discussing on Wednesday or Thursday of this week. We're planning on meeting at this point on both days. So Mr. Bladine, our executive director, will be working hard to get that noticed. And is there any other comment from other commissioners? Oh, and thank you. I would like to introduce Jay Caboo. He is from Osborne Maladon and works with Mary O'Grady and is advising on this particular matter. So thank you, Jay, for your help in being with us today.
My pleasure. Look forward to working with all of you. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission.
Thank you.
I just like to thank all three of you. I know this is complex material and involves a lot of hard thinking, and we appreciate, and we're glad you're here.
I echo that. Thank you.
Same here. We couldn't have hired two better attorneys, and adding Jade to the mix, to be able to work with issues that come up, whether it be the AG's office or anybody else. I think we have two very competent and very attorneys that are willing to cooperate and help out and make things easier for not only us, but also the AG's office. So thank you so much for your help and your time.
Any other thoughts, comments? Okay, that takes us to agenda item 6, which is adjournment. So I declare this meeting adjourned. The time is 11:18. Thank you all.